As we kickstart this edition of EVConIndia, I, on behalf of Blue Circle, would like to take a few moments to thank all our esteemed partners for putting their shoulders to the event. A special thanks to our main sponsors, Log9 Materials and Hero Electric, knowledge partners Alvarez and Marcel for creating the white paper, investment partner Indian Angel Network for co-authoring the Startup Ref program, accelerator partner Huddle, and real estate partner JLL. It's been an absolute pleasure working with their teams and getting their valuable support. Also, a big shout out to all my team members for working all the hours to pull this off. Thank you, distinguished audience, for joining us, most of whom were CEOs and CXOs and senior leaders. Many among them are our members and are repeat visitors to our webinars. This is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue. For those of you who are new with us today, India-based startup Blue Circle is the world's first sector-specific opportunity and knowledge exchange networking app for business leaders. It is somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for senior leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with over 15,000 plus rapidly growing community of like-minded leaders from India and across the globe, exchange high-quality curated content, and access business opportunities across 20 sectors such as e-mobility, energy, real estate, and many more. Those leaders among you who are interested, please do join us. Coming back to today's discussion, it is a privilege and a pleasure to welcome today's keynote speaker, who is handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience he brings in. Without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Vivek Nair, Head Brand Strategy and Marketing, Log9 Materials. He has over 12 years of marketing expertise and has led several roles in practically every aspect of marketing, including product management, brand planning, marketing communications, digital customer experience, and storytelling. Vivek has worked with some of the marquee names in the industry, such as Volvo Eicher Commercial, Tata Motors, Ashok Leyland, and Danfoss. The discussion will revolve around the topic battery as a service for the last mile logistics segment in India. Now I request Vivek to please begin the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Gautam. Hello, everyone. I shall share my screen and just let me know once you see it. So everyone, if you look at the last 2 decades, a lot has changed. Our lifestyles have changed. Our ecosystem has changed. But one thing which has changed the most is our perspective about a lot of things. And one of them, which stands out, is our perspective on what we call ownership. Ownership, what we used to know, revolved around entitlement, something that we owned, something that we took pride in. But today, that pride, that entitlement has given way to convenience. Think about as many brands as you can: Uber, Zoomcar, well, just a few of them. But all of these have proven time and again that your ownership need not always be linked to your entitlement, but it could also be about the service and the convenience provided to you. Well, the new poster boy on the industry is EVs, and EVs are no behind the other sectors when it comes to evolving. And that's what we're going to talk about today: battery as a service. What does that mean? Let's find out. But before that, guys, let's look at the logistics sector. Now, you may ask, why are we talking about the logistics sector when the topic is about electric vehicles? If you come to realize, for an individual owner and vis-a-vis a B2B customer, one that uses the vehicle for the logistics sector, the distance that a logistics customer would use his or her vehicle for a month is possibly what we might end up using in a year or a year and a half. And what does that mean? More the kilometers, more the carbon footprint, and hence more the opportunity to make a positive difference should the transition happen to the EVs. And hence the focus being the logistics sector, and going further, the last mile logistics sector. Come to look at India's logistics sector, well, quite surprisingly, and quite an outlier, if I may say that, 85% of the transportation of goods that happen in India still happen on roads, which is not quite the case in other countries. Varying from as low as 30 to up to 50%, well, seen But in India, it's up to 85%, which basically means what? That the logistics sector has a very, very huge influence on India's carbon footprint. Let's look at some other stat as well. Come to look at the average CO2 footprint from the logistics sector in India, it's 285 grams CO2, vis-a-vis a global weighted average where it's 204. Is it really surprising? Well, not. We just looked at it. 85% of the road transport converting into this. Let's look at one last stat. The 5 Indian metro cities definitely made their names in a lot of different ways across the global arena, but here they also make a name wherein the 5 Indian metro cities emit more CO2 in the last mile deliveries, well, more than what Canada and France could do together. Quite a number, isn't it? So logistics sector is one of the leading source of carbon emissions, everyone. Let's look at the last mile logistics sector. Now, what does last mile logistics sector mean? Last mile, as the name suggests, is the last leg of movement of goods and people from a warehouse or a hub to the final destination. That's what we typically refer to as last mile. The famous names that we know as last mile are everyone from the Swiggies and the Zomatos all the way to the Flipkarts and the Amazons and much more. Let's look at some numbers which kind of tell us the magnanimity and the size of this sector in India. If you were to look at the intra-city logistics segment, it pegs at around $5 billion. And if you come to look at the growth, while we have been growing at an 18% CAGR, we are estimated to grow at a 24% CAGR in the times to come. What does this mean now? It basically means that first, we're going to be placing a lot of orders across a lot of apps on our phones, and which definitely is going to translate into many individuals riding the 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, and 4-wheelers, delivering goods across the length and breadth of the cities in India. If you look at the last mile logistics in India, 50% of it comes from FMCG, thanks to the last mile delivery to the smallest of retail outlets across the length and breadth of the countries, the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities. And then, of course, the growing segment, the e-commerce. So come to conclude on this, everyone, electrification of this sector or transformation of this sector is but imperative for us to move forward in a fight against climate change. Well, is it just a fight against climate change? Let's look at this. This is where we are. We just saw what the numbers look like when we talk about what a clean, green world do we live in. But is that clean and green enough? No, which is why we thought of this. The 2030 EV vision, wherein we said a big chunk of our existing vehicles and the vehicles to come will translate and transform into electric vehicles. But why so? Because there is a much larger goal that India as a country and us as a community are fighting towards. The net zero by 2070. Net zero by 2070 is not going to be an overnight change. It's not going to be something which only one sector is responsible for or one action is going to suffice. It's but going to be a sum total of every small action that we take towards net zero. And trust me, EV transformation is going to play a pivotal role in that. So EV transformation is essential, yes. Imperative, yes. Critical, absolutely yes. But is it easy? Well, I don't think so. Let's see what are the key bottlenecks that we foresee in our journey towards net zero vision from an EV perspective. Right product and the technology. Now, it is needless to say that of the media coverages that EV as a sector got in the last 6 months, a good chunk of it was primarily because of the fire incidences that happened across the country, isn't it? Are we happy about it? No. But have we questioned why? No again. That's because we're not too sure if the EVs, the batteries sold in India, were they essentially designed for the Indian climatic and operating conditions? A very, very pertinent question to ask. Policies and regulations. Policies and regulations are not just a piece of white paper with a black print talking about a lot of do's and don'ts. They have to be bespoke for an ecosystem, bespoke towards a vision, bespoke around a challenge. Are our policies and regulations such as that? Well, no. Do we have the right checks and balances in ensuring that the right product hits the road? Well, maybe there are some gaps in there as well. How could we forget talent? Who exactly is going to be working on designing the next best batteries, EVs, technologies for not just India, but globally? It's people, it's us, it's the brightest of minds in the industry. Do we have them? Do we have adequate of them? Who's going to be servicing your vehicle should you be stranded in the middle of nowhere? Well, late midnight. Well, your car just got out of charge, or there's some technical snag. Do we have enough mechanics, technicians, on-ground staff? Who even know how exactly does an EV work and how to address it? Last but not the least, when was the last time you ever were worried while venturing out about what if I was to not find a petrol or a diesel station? I don't think so. We have a petrol or a diesel station almost every single kilometer across the major highways, across inside the cities as well. But are we so confident about the EVs? Would you be confident taking your EV late at night with your family with exactly the same confidence that you would with your petrol and your diesel car? Well, I wouldn't possibly be. Hence the question. Will clearing the bottlenecks accelerate the EV adoption? So let's talk about a utopian world. We got the right product, we got the right technology, rules and regulations are spick and span. We got the perfect, brightest minds designing the vehicles and the perfect, hardworking labor on the road, ensuring that the vehicles are always on road. And last but not the least, we have infrastructure, charging infrastructure, and after-sales infrastructure at every single point on the Indian roads. Would that suffice? As much as I would like to say yes, the answer possibly is maybe not. And why? The cost of acquisition. Have you realized that today, if you were to look at a two-wheeler, a three-wheeler, or a four-wheeler, and compare that to its leg-to-leg comparison of an ICE vehicle, you would easily see a cost difference of anything between 30% to as high as 60%. What is the reason behind such high upfront cost? But before we get into the reason, let's also be very frank with ourselves. Well, yes, we do believe that EVs will go a long way in fighting climate change, but are we affluent enough? Are we so price insensitive enough to let go that spike of 30 to 50% cost because there is a larger goal that we are trying to achieve? Well, in a country like India, where sustenance is more important than sustainability, the answer is a big capital no. Hence, let's deep dive. What is the reason behind the high upfront cost? If you were to dissect an electric vehicle and look at the cost contribution towards the overarching vehicle, you'll realize that the battery by itself alone constitutes more than 50% of the cost of the vehicle. More than 50%. And even if you were to take into consideration there are a lot of subsidies, there are a lot of relaxations which the Indian government gives, but even if you were to consider all of these together, you still do not come leg to leg with your ICE equivalents. Hence, what's the best thing to do? It's imperative to decouple the battery and the EV. If you were to remove the largest cost component of an electric vehicle, aren't we solving for affordability? Let's find out. Hence, introducing the core of today's talk, which is BaaS, Battery as a Service. Let's look at a formal introduction and a formal definition of what a BaaS is all about. As I said, it just basically decouples batteries from the electric vehicles, and most important of all, it transforms the upfront cost of acquisition into equally spread out cost of operations over the duration of the usage of the vehicle. And that's how it ensures affordability. Today, we have two most spoken models in the Indian EV ecosystem. Let's look at the first one of them. Battery swapping As the name suggests, every single time your EV gets drained of the charge, you take that drained out battery to a swapping station and swap it for a charged battery and then go ahead. On the other side, we have the battery leasing, where you do have an alignment with the service provider at a certain amount of capital that you pay every month, and then keep charging your vehicle like you would have with a normal ICE vehicle that is refilling it with petrol and diesel, here it being the energy charge, and then you go on with that. So there is a lot of talk around the swapping and leasing, and what we have been trying to address is to figure out what is the most promising route going forward for the Indian EV industry. I can't but visualize a scenario that should the battery swapping was to happen for our mobile phones, and imagine how every single day you would walk to the nearest battery store because you don't have an option to charge your phone, and that's all you do the whole day. I mean, that's funny and that's a scary together. But battery swapping does show its promising side as well. But is it really promising? Let's find out. First and foremost, everyone, let's understand one simple thing. Batteries in electric vehicles are much more than just a bunch of cells plugged together and plugged inside a vehicle. It is an ecosystem of its own. It comes with its own bells and whistles, comes with its own tech, comes with its own electronics. And so if you were to plug and deplug the battery every single time your battery gets drained, your safety gets compromised. If you were to have 100 vehicles on the road, how many batteries would you have to buy and stock to ensure you have enough batteries to swap as and when? My guesstimate is at least a 50% more to even 100% more, depending upon the usage, depending upon the vehicle, and so on and so forth. Is that the most capital smart thing to do? I'm not too sure about it. Log9 is one of the pioneers when it comes to battery technology. And from the batteries that we make for the industry, I can tell you our two-wheeler batteries weigh around 50 kgs, three-wheeler batteries weigh around 150 kgs, four-wheeler batteries, they weigh 350 kgs. Now do a rough math. If you were to look at an ecosystem where you were to facilitate swapping of these featherlight batteries, was that going to be an easy task for you? Think about it. Battery swapping sounds very interesting, but here's a scenario. What if I was to tell you that every time you stepped out, you should only refuel your vehicle at IOCL, or just only a BPCL? Wouldn't you be spending half your time searching for a specific fuel station? Well, in the event that you have 15 different types of batteries across 15 different types of vehicles, that's more or less what we will end up doing. Well, I'm sure this can be addressed in the times to come, or at least I hope it could. But at this point in time, battery swapping doesn't give you an option to charge the battery. People living in the metro cities, the Bangalores and the Bombays of the world, if you were to use your vehicle for intra-city transport, would you expect your battery swapping station to be on the outskirts near the Bangalore airport, or would you like it bang in between the MG road? Well, of course, it's a no-brainer that you would want it right in the middle of the MG road. But what cost does it come at? Rentals are definitely not getting cheaper. Again, investments. Lack of battery standardization, which just goes back to the previous point. If you have umpteen number of batteries Imagine the complexities of looking at charging stations for these batteries and everything that follows after that. And last but not the least, well, there is definitely no room for, I would say, similarities, commonalities between technologies, commonalities, and at the end of the day, convenience for your customer definitely gets compromised. Now let's look at leasing. Does leasing have that competitive edge? Maybe in a couple of places it does. First, absolutely zero additional inventory of batteries. Why? Because every user is married to a battery, and that marriage is not getting divorced. So there is no reason as to why you want to keep a plus one somewhere. Absolutely no need for it. There is no capital getting blocked. There is no complexities coming in. Second, safety, because you have never taken the battery out. You know for a fact that it's in exactly the same operating condition that you received the vehicle in, and hence there is absolutely no opportunity for sabotaging the safety of the vehicle. Come to think of OEMs, and think of OEMs from an innovation perspective. Would you have loved if our favorite OEMs would end up making Me Too products than a state-of-the-art, cutting-edge, industry-leading products, each of its kind, each serving a different purpose, and each to the different tastes of the consumers? But how could it happen when you are bound by the same types of batteries that you're forced to plug into the vehicle? Well, leasing frees you of that. Decoupled from the network of swapping stations, as I said, now you're not searching for an IOCL, BTCL stations. Any charging station today can address and accommodate any EV on the Indian roads. Largely, we have two protocols. One is the Bharat DC001 and the CCCS2, one for the low voltage ones and one for the high voltage ones. But going forward, given the standardization which the government and the industry is trying to push together, I believe there is going to be no gap in between them as well. Avoid having a vast network of swapping stations. Do we really need to delve into that? We know that, right? Okay. Can be adapted for any size and type of the vehicle. As I said, now that you have freed the OEMs, freed the technology providers, freed the battery technology providers from any limitations in terms of the size or shape, imagine what innovation can do. And last but not the least, as I said, innovations pushing the boundaries on the technologies of the vehicle, technologies of the batteries. That brings me to my last slide. In a nutshell, if you were to look at the EV industry as a whole, if you were to look at a helicopter view of the overall industry and solve for EV transformation, there would largely be three challenges that we will have to solve for. Big question: which of the two BAS models would be more effective in this pursuit? What are those three challenges? Product reliability and technology, infrastructure, affordability. Well, affordability, let's agree that both the swapping stations as well as the leasing mechanisms will address affordability. But let's look at reliability and infrastructure as well. So here are certain pertinent questions that we must ask ourselves. Product reliability and technology. Can we create an ecosystem that nurtures innovation? Which of these two BAS models can facilitate that, drive that? Which of the two BAS models can drive grounds up technologies for India in India? It's quite surprising and yet shocking to know that while we speak of EV transformation, while we speak of a larger EV vision, why isn't there much focus on building something for India in India? Atmanirbhar Bharat was never meant to be just a pretty word to be used on leaflets and brochures. It was meant to be a belief system, to be driven, to be practiced, and to be put to use. Well, there is big time challenge and a big gap in that as well. Last, how and which of these two best models can put paramount importance on safety and reliability above everything else? I don't have right or wrong answers for these, everyone. I'm just putting forth some pertinent questions. Coming to infrastructure, which of these two BAS models can avoid heavy investments for inventory and logistics? Which of these two can ensure versatility across product platforms and battery techs? And which of these can accelerate a wider network pan India? So infrastructure is not just about having a touch point. It's also about what was the cost that touch point came at. What value does that touch point add to the brand it is being served by and to the customer it is being served to? Last but not the least, affordability. As I said, both swapping and leasing might possibly tick all the right boxes when it comes to affordability. But these are the three larger pillars that we as an industry would like to look at if we were to solve for the larger Indian EV transformation. On that note, thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Vivek. That was a very good session. I'll just quickly jump to the Q&A session because we have quite a few questions which have come across. Let's begin with the first question from Rajan. He's asking what all cost drivers energy operator providing BAS needs to consider while pricing his services.
So let's talk about the larger ones, which are going to be let's look at the most cost intensive ones. Let's start with the real estate itself, because that's like the foundational element behind any charging infrastructure that you're going to put. Where, what, and how. What capacity of energy capacity do you have over there? Also look at what is going to be the percentage utilization of your vehicles over there. How versatile is your charging infrastructure that you're going to put up over there? Are you only solving for a two-wheeler, or are you solving for a larger vehicle as well? So in my opinion, these are the first 3 or 4 questions that we must ask ourselves while pricing the service to the end customer.
Thank you. Very well put. Akshay is asking, and first he's other stating, which also Dharmesh has a fairly similar question. So I'll just ask you both. Log9 Materials claims its batteries are more durable and charge faster than lithium batteries. How are you standardizing your batteries to fit in BAS? Pretty much the same question which has come from Dharmesh is that how are you achieving BAS? Lots of work is required from all stakeholders. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so this will have to be addressed in from a couple of perspectives. Okay, so yes, Log9 batteries do promise a much longer lifetime. To quote a figure, our batteries last more than 10 to 15 years. Okay, and yes, we do promise a much faster charging. So for a two-wheeler, it takes around 15 minutes, and for a three-wheeler, it takes around 35 minutes. Now, how is it happening? So first, the fundamental chemistry on the basis of which our batteries are designed, enable this fast charging, and hence reduces and solves for the time taken, and also the overall convenience of the customer. But coming to the BAS perspective, we follow the BAS, that is the battery leasing model. Now, we do have an associated body with whom we work, who kind of work on 2 fronts. One, leasing the vehicle to the fleet operators, and at the same time, an extended wing of it, which works very closely with the CPO operators to ensure that the charging infrastructure follows where the fleet operators are operating the vehicle. So it's more like a chicken and egg story, and I guess most of the industry has been kind of caught up in that, which is where you talk about either the vehicle comes first or the charging infrastructure comes first. But ideally, you will have to solve for both of them in tandem if you were to actually make battery as a service a success.
Fair point. We have a question which has come from an anonymous attendee. I wish I knew that. So a section of the industry is not in favor of battery standardization, as it feels that such a move will kill innovation and stall research and development. How can this affect BAS growth?
Well, firstly, we do agree with you. We do agree with you that battery standardization does tie up hands and does kind of kill the room for innovation and further evolution of the batteries. But coming to address as to how does it affect BAS, again, going back to the talk that I just had, if you were to talk about a swapping, then unfortunately you will have no option but to look at standardization. Otherwise, the complexities of managing inventories, logistics, deliveries is going to be a big hassle, which is where if we were to look at leasing as a go-to model, what we need to ensure is just the presence of the adequate charging points, which, let's understand one thing, if a brand such as Log9 is looking at a battery leasing model, we take complete ownership of the performance, the safety, the reliability, and alongside that, the convenience, which is why we work very closely with the CPO operators to ensure there is a charging station as and when a Log9 customer needs it.
Sounds good. Ankit is asking, so the delta on lower usage cost of EV versus ICE goes down with BAS?
Yes. And let's understand how. As I said, between a leg-to-leg comparison, if you were to look at an ICE versus an EV always spikes up by around 30 to 50%. Now, out of that 30 to 50%, 50% of the cost, or more than 50% of the cost, is by a battery. I take the battery out of the equation. Now, what you have and what you're paying for upfront is lower than your ICE engine or ICE vehicle. But at the same time, your operating cost, because you're operating on an electric vehicle and not an ICE vehicle, your per kilometer cost any which ways comes down, and coupled that with a very minimal per month ownership cost definitely ensures that your overall cost of operations on an EV with a BAS will definitely come much drastically lower than that of an ICE equivalent.
Thank you. Ankit, I hope that answers your question. I'll move on to Rajat. I know we have very little time, so I'll quickly jump to one question of the other. Rajat is asking, how much of battery standardization is there in developed countries?
Unfortunately, Rajat, I'm not the most informed to address that question of yours, but I do promise I'll definitely check with the concerned expert inside Log9 and I'll come back to you on that. Gautam, just help me with this question later, please.
Sure, I'll connect the two of you over mail. The next question is again from an anonymous, so I can't connect you, but I hope you can answer this if you do have it. So time taken to charge batteries, which of the two BAS models solves for this, considering this is more important for the logistics provider who have higher utility?
The time taken for charging is a function of the battery and its chemistry, and is independent of which model you use. All that you can be fortunate and lucky enough is every time you run out of battery in case of a battery swapping, your battery stations have charged batteries. Otherwise, that's where your problem is going to be. Otherwise, to the extent that I understand, the time taken to charge a battery has got no relation with the BAS model that you work with.
Thank you. I got it covered. So just moving on to the next one. This is actually coming from a person in Germany. He wants to get connected with you. So not a question. I'll connect the two of you over mail. He wants to get in touch with Log9. Thanks, Suraj, for that. Shehzad is asking, how do you manage the ownership in case of any damage or theft?
Ownership, damage or theft of the vehicle or the battery?
Of the battery. In case of
the battery.
Yeah.
Okay. So in case I can speak for the leasing. Okay. So in case of leasing, because Log9 is at the end of the day the ultimate entity who has taken ownership of the vehicle from the OEM and then in turn leasing the vehicle to the end customer, it eventually becomes our responsibility to kind of take ownership of any damage or any say technical snag which happens on the battery, and also because of the fact that we are the battery technology providers, so that altogether becomes our accountability to take care of.
Understood. The last question, which it actually is it's around the circular economy. The question is, how does Log9 plan to manage the end of life batteries?
Okay, I can partially answer this, but again, Gautam, I will want you to kind of connect this person with me offline as well. So one thing that we are definitely solving for, as far as the end of battery life is concerned, is by ensuring that our batteries live, work, and perform much longer than what a conventional NMC battery does. So while we have records of 15 plus years lifetime, while a typical battery ends up in 2 to 3 years, that in itself ensures that over a period of say 15 to 20 years, the number of Log9 batteries hitting the landmine vis-a-vis the competition battery hitting the landmine, there's going to be a huge difference. Now, what was the second part of this question, Gautam, if in case?
He was just asking, how do you use this after the end of the battery for a vehicle? So how would you use this?
So this is the first step to it. The second thing that we all need to take cognizance of is, while EV industry today is in a very nascent stages, in the decade to come, we will see recycling and reusage of these battery materials and elements on a much larger scale. So we are very optimistic about the fact that by the time our batteries start hitting the landmines, we would have solved for the battery recycling and hence reducing the impact on the environment.
Interesting. And just to add to this, yesterday we were having a conversation with one of the leaders as well. He added that if you're using a battery in a premium vehicle like a Tesla, that same very battery can actually be used after 10 years in a two-wheeler or a three-wheeler as well. So it's not necessary that it comes to another industry like the electronics industry. It can probably pass down in the same industry just to a lighter vehicle.
And that primarily comes from the fact, Gautam, that batteries, Log9 batteries, outlive the vehicles. So a typical vehicle, you may possibly expect it to, be in the right condition and intact, say, for example, 4 to 5, 6, 7, 8 years tops. But our batteries are still our batteries still have the juices in them even at the end of that. So then what do? We can always look at kind of adapting that battery for some other application, and hence again further utilizing the rest of the energy stored in the battery, or the life which is stored in the battery. My bad.
No, that's great. Very well put, I must say. And on this note, I'd like to thank you very much for such an insightful and engaging session. It was a privilege to hear you. And our guests and I have been hooked on till the end, and I've taken home several nuggets. And also thank you to the leaders in the audience for joining us and for staying till the end and for always sharing excellent questions.
Thank you so much, Gautam. Thank you so much, everyone. See you.
Bye-bye.